Alice Howarth!
Well, isn't that lovely? Thank you very much. And thank you all for being in the room, even though we gave you no choice. You have to be in the room. There is nothing else on. I'm taking it as a win that I got you all in here. It's my responsibility. You're all here for me. I'm going to take it that way. So, in 2017, lifestyle business CEO and actor Gwyneth Paltrow released a product on her lifestyle platform, Goop. The product was a jade yoni egg, which cost $66, and was at the time associated with some extraordinary claims. They claimed that the jade yoni egg balances hormones, regulates menstrual cycles, prevents uterine prolapse, and increases bladder control. Speaking for Goop at the time on their lifestyle platform, Shiva Rose, an actor and entrepreneur, wrote that jade eggs can help cultivate sexual energy, increase orgasm, balance the cycle, stimulate key reflexology around the vaginal walls, tighten and tone, prevent uterine prolapse, increase control of the whole perineum and bladder, develop and clear chi pathways in the body, intensify feminine energy, and invigorate our life force. She said, it's all about sexual potency and even beauty. If your hormones are balanced, your skin will look better. She said, jade also takes away negativity and cleanses. It's a very heavy material, very powerful. Now, jade eggs aren't the only type of yoni egg that you can get. You can also get them in different materials. I've got here a rose quartz one that hopefully the camera guy is going to zoom in for you now so that you can see that. It's on a nice little string, handy little retrieval string, so that you can retrieve it once you've finished with it. So yoni comes from a Sanskrit word. It can be interpreted to mean womb. It's generally used in a very spiritual way. It's used to represent feminine energy. And lots of different companies sell yoni eggs, and they all have different ways that they recommend they use them. But this is how Goop currently recommend that you use the yoni egg. So they say that you should first sterilize it in very hot water for about 10 minutes, and then let it cool down, because you don't want to use it fresh from the sterilized hot water. And then you insert it into the vagina, you clench and release repeatedly on and off for up to 10 to 15 minutes. And then if that's comfortable, you can increase that a little bit more. After you've finished using it, you give it another clean, and then you keep it in or on a space that is sacred to you or has good vibes. Some people do recommend that if you feel like your yoni egg is losing a little bit of its charge, it's not got the same good feelings about it, you can charge it under the full moon, and then it will get a little bit more good energy. And the claims around yoni eggs come from two different angles, really. So we've got the idea that particular crystals have magical properties. The claims on this particular example here for rose quartz say that rose quartz has feminine energy of nourishment and comfort. It dissolves emotional wounds, fears, and resentment. And it opens you to giving and receiving love. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you why crystals don't have magical properties. I don't think you need me to tell you that. But the other side of claims around yoni eggs come with a little bit more nuance. So these come from the idea that Kegel exercises, strengthening the muscles of the pelvic floor, can have benefits. And this is true. For some people, toning the pelvic floor can have some benefits. In this case, they're claiming that you're helping to tone muscles that contract during orgasm to make the orgasm more intense, that it also supports the bladder, uterus, and rectum. So to say, this comes with a little bit more nuance. This is the idea that toning the pelvic floor can be beneficial for some people, and that is true. And the way we do that is to have these rhythmic contractions. We contract and we release repeatedly for a number of repetitions, kind of like you would in the gym if you're doing repetitions to strengthen a muscle. You can do the same with the pelvic floor. But initially, when the yoni eggs were first released, the claims were a little bit different. The idea was to use them for sometimes hours at a time, to keep them in and holding for hours at a time. And that can sort of start to have the opposite effect on the pelvic floor. So as with any muscle, when you want to strengthen a muscle, those muscles need to learn to both tense and relax, and the relaxation is really important. If you're not training the muscles to relax and you're just overexerting the muscles, that's when you can start to get those muscles become dysfunctional. And this can cause pelvic pain in some people who over-clench the pelvic floor. And this can actually be a problem that sometimes practitioners see in yoga. People who do a lot of yoga, that they're constantly told to hold the pelvic floor whilst you're doing all of these yoga poses, and that can start to cause pelvic dysfunction because you're really not supposed to just hold on for dear life at all times. Now, if you want to do Kegel exercises, you can do that with a device that you can use to clench around, but it's always best to use a skin-safe material like silicone rather than something porous like crystal, which bacteria can get into and can increase your risk of infection. So generally speaking, even the muscle toning claims around yoni eggs, the yoni eggs themselves are not particularly valuable. As you can imagine, when Gwyneth Paltrow first launched her yoni eggs, there was lots of criticism from lots of different people in lots of different places. And you'll notice that I'm being quite careful in where I talk about what is on Goop's site now and what were their historic 2018 claims. And that's because those are two different things. Because in 2018, the year after they released the yoni eggs, there was a lawsuit, and Goop agreed to pay $145,000 in settlement to the California Consumer Protection Office for making unsubstantiated claims. Now, this isn't a talk about Goop. It's not a talk about Gwyneth Paltrow, but I think it's a really interesting place to start on a talk about wellness, because Goop launched as a lifestyle platform in 2008. This has been around for 15 years. It's been going for a good long while. So it's become a big part of the wellness landscape. And Gwyneth Paltrow, in particular, is on top of wellness trends. She's very on top of this space. Speaking for the New York Times in 2019, she said, "People give me a lot of shit, and then they just follow along. I've often somehow had a sense of where things are going in this space and gone towards it, and people have followed. That's why it stopped worrying me or hurting my feelings when I get shit, because I'm like, I know where this is going. The louder they shout, the quicker they adopt." She's a very good businesswoman. But she also cares about her customers. She also wants to give her customers products that work for them. So speaking for New York Times in 2018, she said, "We always want to be moving culture forward with what we do in the content and in the offerings, and also create conversations and forums to help eliminate shame. I think a lot of women experience a lot of shame in their lives. The more we talk about things that are sometimes uncomfortable, that are sometimes unknown, it might resonate with somebody, and then we might help them shed a little bit of that feeling." And I agree with Gwyneth Paltrow here. I think this is really important. I'm standing on stage here talking about things you can put in your vagina, or probably not put in your vagina, because I think it's important to talk about things that we find uncomfortable, that we find embarrassing, that we feel ashamed about, because that's how we help people to deal with things that are difficult in their life. Regardless of whether I agree with the way that Gwyneth Paltrow goes about it or not, I think she's right on this point. But there's another important part of what Goop is all about. Speaking when she was Goop's chief content officer, Elise Lonan said, "That's what we want. People to feel empowered, people to feel curious, people to feel like there are no bad questions on what works for them, and that what works for them might be different than what works for someone else. But that doesn't make it wrong or bad." Goop is all about empowerment for their customers. They're positioned as a place for empowerment. But Goop aren't the only people making crystal health products. They're not even the only people making crystal health products for the vagina. This is a company called Chakrubs. They say self-love isn't something you have to practice alone. They say that chakrubs are sex toys made from natural crystal that bring a sense of sacredness to your playtime. They say crystals have perfect molecular structures that have positive effects on our electromagnetic fields. And they say chakrubs derives from chakra, a Sanskrit word describing energy wheels, because cultural appropriation is rife in the wellness industry. So these are some of the products that you can buy on chakrubs, not just for the vagina this time. They've also got butt plugs, and they've got the butt plugs, the eggs, and the dildo there are made of, so these two are made of obsidian, and then you've got Indian jade over there. So when it comes to the black obsidian, they say that it's the stone of protection and the shadow. It promotes self-control and keeping excessive energies and passions under control. It eases past relationship trauma and overcoming emotional strain. It promotes clarity when making difficult decisions. So if you want to make a decision, just pop your butt plug in there. It will give you some clarity. It absorbs negative energies and attachments, and it releases sexual shame and healing-related traumas. And of the green aventurine, this is the Indian jade that they talk about. This is the stone of luck and earth energy. It stimulates the heart chakra to rejuvenate the physical body. It calms chaotic thoughts and grounds one's energy. It resolves blockages and rebalances the root chakra. It reconnects you to the energy of abundance and luck, and it supplements earth energy back into your field. But again, this is about empowerment. It's all about self-love. It's about healing. It's about releasing trauma. It's about what's good for the customer. At least that's what the messaging and the marketing suggests. But there are companies who capitalize more on the insecurities of their customers. So these are two products that I've found on researching these sorts of things. One is the Jamu stick. This says, you might not be able to read it because of the terrible font, but it says, like a virgin again. Return to your former tightness in seconds. They say it's a natural product intended for vaginal cleansing, balancing urovaginal microflora, elimination of vaginal discharge and odor, tightening of the vagina, increase of libido, and intensification of sexual feelings. I've actually got another product that's very similar to that here. This is a Madura stick. It's unopened. It's still in some plastic packaging. The camera can pick that up there. Put it in front of my face so that you've got some contrast. And they say that it is for ladies who want to develop their full potential. The typo there is theirs, not mine, just to point that out. They say that it's to stimulate and intensify mutual excitement during coitus and to eliminate vaginal white discharges and banish unpleasant vaginal odor that usually accompanies a sticky whitish vaginal discharge, which most men find very repulsive. These are all about social pressures around odor and around texture of discharge and all of those sorts of things. It's not good. And the other product here is these herb balls or pearls or tea bags that people use. Don't ever Google these. These come with some pretty horrific images. And in both cases, these two types of products have herbs in them that are quite caustic. So they're drying out the very delicate mucosal membranes of the vaginal walls and can cause quite significant damage. And they're predicated on solving a problem. So I want to illustrate here that while some wellness products are all about empowerment, others capitalize on people's insecurities. And some of the very best ones do a little bit of both. Some of the best marketing is when you can convince people that they have a problem, that there is a problem with how they work or with the issues that they have, feeding that insecurity, and then they can sell them the product to fix that insecurity, like the spandex control underwear in a fashion industry that demonizes body fat. So let's talk a little bit about the wellness industry. Wellness is by no means a new idea. In fact, some forms of wellness have existed for thousands of years, but it's safe to say that we're in a particularly thriving era of wellness. According to the Global Wellness Institute, which is a group which aims to empower wellness worldwide, in 2020, the global wellness economy was worth $4.4 trillion. Today, it's probably up to $5.3 trillion. This is a massive, sprawling industry that fits into all of these sorts of categories: traditional and complementary medicine, public health prevention and personalized medicine, healthy eating, nutrition and weight loss, physical activity, spas, springs, workplace wellness, wellness real estate, mental wellness, wellness tourism, personal care and beauty. And actually, this probably illustrates that wellness is so vague a term as to be next to useless. So what do we actually mean when we're talking about wellness? This isn't just pseudoscientific companies necessarily. This is also companies that are just tapping into what we mean by wellness, and that can come under beauty and health, fitness, sleep, stress, or nutrition. Such a massive aspect of our lives. And this can be all sorts of different types of business as well. We've got apps, we've got lifestyle platforms, subscriptions, at-home testing and femtech, weight management programs, wellness portals, corporate wellness plans, and wellness incentive companies. So why is wellness such a draw, and why are women in particular so easy a target market? One of the reasons, which I'm not going to cover in too much depth, is this kind of feeds into this idea of work-life balance. This is a topic that's covered pretty well in Rena Raphael's book, The Gospel of Wellness, and it's the idea that things have changed for women an awful lot over the last few decades, and particularly in a capitalist structure, many more of us are in a position where we're working full-time. But studies show that that doesn't mean that the workload at home has been adequately redistributed. Women are more likely to do the lion's share of childcare, household chores, cleaning responsibilities, or carry the emotional weight of household admin like holiday planning or gift giving. And society tells us we have to look perfect to boot, spend time and money on makeup and beauty, and keep fit and exercise, and spend all our time and money finding the perfect clothes to wear. Listeners to the podcast will know that I spent a very long time trying to find an outfit to wear for this very moment. Women are told they can have it all, be everything, and that is, quite frankly, exhausting. We're burnt out, we're worn out, we're stressed and overworked, we have less time than ever to take care of ourselves, and we're looking for the quick fixes that we can throw money at and solve our problems. And the wellness industry has jumped in and said that they have the answers. We can have the wonderful life of Gwyneth Paltrow and glossy wellness influencers if we just throw the money at it. Of course, many of these things aren't unique to women. Everybody's working harder than ever before, but there are particular factors that are amplified for women in particular. But I want to focus on another element of factors which are amplified in women or people who are perceived by society as women, and that is health and medical bias. So to illustrate this, I'm going to talk you through a few examples, and the first one is this. So this is a news story that you might have seen around 2019, if you can remember the before times, before the pandemic. And these were two headlines from The Conversation in the Telegraph, which read, "Contraception, the way you take the pill has more to do with the Pope than your health." And the Telegraph said, "A contraceptive pill can be taken every day of the month after scientists dismiss the Pope rule." Now, there's layers to why I want to use this as an example, but let's start with the history of the combined oral contraceptive pill. So the combined oral contraceptive pill was invented by these 5 people, 2 scientists in Gregory Pincus and Min-Trey Chang, 2 activists in Catherine McCormick and Margaret Sanger, and a doctor in John Rock. Now, the pill basically works by tricking the body into thinking it's pregnant and so preventing ovulation. And in the early 1950s, when the pill was first developed, early experiments were actually looking at how it could be used to treat women who were suffering with infertility. So instead of trying to prevent pregnancy, we were looking at trying to help people who were struggling to conceive. The idea was maybe if the body thinks it's been pregnant before, it can then learn how to become pregnant in the future. So researchers gave the pill for a few months at a time to see if it would work in women who wanted to conceive but were struggling. And eventually, later down the line, the pill was approved for contraceptive use. And 60 years later, the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health updated guidance on how we take the contraceptive pill. So the combined oral contraceptive pill, until that point, had been recommended to always be taken with a break. So under traditional use, you would take the pill for 21 days, 21 consecutive days, and then you would have a 7-day break or hormone-free interval. At this point, you would have a bleed, known as a breakthrough bleed, which is similar to menstruation, but not exactly the same. And then you would repeat. So taking for 21 days on and 7 days off each month. There were other ways that you could take the pill. There was a shortened hormone-free interval option, so you could reduce the break to just 4 days, or you could take it for 3 consecutive months back-to-back, and then take a 4 or 7-day break, and there was some kind of other flexible extended use options as well. But in 2019, the guidance changed to include this continuous use, that you can take the combined oral contraceptive pill every single day. You don't need to take a break. But what has the Pope got to do with this? So the Pope does get a mention in the history of the combined oral contraceptive pill, and that's because of this pamphlet written by Catholic and Dr. John Rock. So the Catholic Church has always had a problem with contraception, but it does allow the rhythm method, so that's avoiding sex when you're fertile. And the idea behind this is that artificial contraception is considered to be against God's will. So John Rock tried to argue that the combined oral contraceptive pill is natural. It's natural because it uses hormones that are naturally produced by the body. And therefore, it should be allowed by the Catholic Church. It's not interfering with God's will. It's a natural form of contraceptive. And having a monthly bleed might well have played into that argument, but it wasn't the original reason for the monthly bleed. That comes from those women with infertility that I told you about in the early trials in the early 1950s. In those days, the hormone doses were much higher. And when I tell you that the combined oral contraceptive pill tricks your body into thinking you're pregnant, when the hormone doses were so much higher, that's really what it did. Women were having symptoms of early pregnancy, tender breasts, morning sickness even. And bear in mind that these were women who were trying to get pregnant, who had sought medical treatment because they were struggling to conceive. The higher dose meant that all of these people had these symptoms and had the emotional connection to wanting to be pregnant. And if they were taking the pill for 3 months at a time, thinking they had pregnancy symptoms, they would then be particularly heartbroken when they stopped taking the pill and the bleed came and proved to them that they weren't pregnant. So the doctors added this monthly break out of compassion to give women the reassurance that they weren't in fact pregnant. They were actually having a monthly bleed, which encouraged them to recognize how that process was working. But here's the issue. Blaming the Pope is a cop-out. The real truth is that for 60 years, we just didn't question it. We didn't ask if the bleed was even necessary. We just expected women to put up with it. And of course, this doesn't just affect women, it also affects people like trans men who might want to avoid having a monthly bleed because it's distressing. And those people could have taken the pill back to back for long periods of time to skip that bleed and weren't given the option. And I find it utterly remarkable that we didn't question it for so long because so many people take the combined oral contraceptive pill. So 2/3 of women aged 20 to 24 take oral contraceptives. That's a huge proportion of the population. And it can have loads of benefits for lots of people. It can reduce the risk of some types of cancer. It can help with period pain or irregular periods. It can help with symptoms of polycystic ovaries, endometriosis, PMS. Improve acne, reduce menopausal symptoms, and maintain bone mineral density in perimenopausal people. it can also protect against pelvic inflammatory disease and reduce the risk of fibroids, ovarian cysts, and non-cancerous breast disease. But on top of all that, it can also just give you lighter, more regular, more predictable, less painful monthly bleeds, or you can just stop it entirely. It has loads of benefits. Of course, there are some disadvantages. It can cause some side effects in the early days when you first take it that can be difficult for people. It can increase your blood pressure, increase your risk of blood clots. And of course, it doesn't protect you from STIs, which means you need to use it alongside a barrier method. But it is a very useful tool for an awful lot of people. But for 60 years, we didn't ask about the break. And when we did, the media joked about it being to do with the Pope. And I think that really highlights just how little weight we give to topics that affect women. My second example is endometriosis. So endometriosis is a condition that causes chronic pelvic pain and affects 10% of women and up to 50% of women with infertility. This is a condition that causes really significant, sometimes debilitating pain in your lower tummy and back, particularly during your period. It causes significant period pain that can stop you doing your normal activities, so disabling pain, pain during or after sex, pain when using the bathroom, gut problems like constipation, diarrhea, and of course difficulty with conceiving. And then you can also have these really heavy periods that sometimes come with clots as well. Now, endometriosis is when tissue that's similar to the tissue that lines the womb grows outside of the womb in the wrong places. So this diagram illustrates some of those wrong places throughout the lower part of the body, but in particular, it can grow on the surface of the bladder, ovaries, and rectum. And we've known about endometriosis for a very long time. This is a record from the Hippocratic Corpus, which talks about symptoms such as uterine ulcers, adhesions, and infertility. And then we've got a record from 460 to 370 BCE, which says the menses sometimes suddenly appear abundantly at the end of 3 months in clots of black blood resembling flesh. Sometimes ulcers of the uterus ensue, requiring much attention. And similar conditions to these have been described throughout every century since then, until it was described using microscopy in 1860. This is not a new condition, it's not new to us. We've known about it for a really long time. And despite that, it takes 8 years on average from onset of symptoms to getting a diagnosis. And this hasn't changed in a decade. In this all-party parliamentary group report from 2020, they found that 58% of people with endometriosis had visited the GP over 10 times. 21 visited doctors in hospital 10 times or more. 53% went to A&E, and 27% went to A&E 3 or more times. And not only does it take a long time with sometimes debilitating symptoms to get diagnosed, the treatments are a bit crap. Firstly, diagnosis requires keyhole surgery. So this is a surgical procedure which requires you to be under general anaesthetic. And then once you've been diagnosed, 11 to 19% of people have no improvement of pain when they're treated. 5 to 59% have reduced but still present pain. 5 to 16% stop treatment because of the side effects. Up to a third of people have recurrence of the condition when they stop their treatment. Of the people who have surgical treatment, so this is going in there to remove some of these endometriomas that we have, there's relapse of 30 to 50% who need additional surgery within 7 years, and 20% see no improvement with that surgery. And even people who have full or partial hysterectomies, there are still some people who have to go on to have further treatment or further surgery within 2 or 7 years. So the final example I want to touch on in this, you might have seen these stories crop up every now and then. This is a headline from the Mirror which says, "Depressed vagina is a real thing and many women are suffering from it." And the Independent says, "Vulvodynia, is a depressed vagina the reason you find sex painful?" As far as I can tell, This originally comes from an episode of Sex and the City. Charlotte talks about having vulvodynia, and I think that's great that we've got that on a very popular TV show. She talks about having vulvodynia and that she was prescribed antidepressants. And Carrie says, "Your vagina's depressed?" And of course, it's very funny and very silly. Now, vulvodynia is a condition that affects, as the name might suggest, the vulva. And it can be localized, so in very specific areas, or it can be generalized and more widespread. And it can be spontaneous, which often means you feel the pain pretty much all the time. Or it can be provoked, so that you only feel the pain with touch or pressure. And it can be relatively mild and something that people can live with reasonably well. Or it can be completely debilitating and mean that even wearing some clothes can be difficult. And vulvodynia is really common. So according to this study, 8% of people have a current case of vulvodynia, and almost 20% have had vulvodynia at some point. And despite how common it is, a lot of people I talk to about it have never even heard of it. Only 60% of people with symptoms of vulvodynia seek treatment. Of those, 40% are never diagnosed, despite how common it is. And causes are only partially understood, and there's no standard care protocol for people with vulvodynia, although, as pointed out in Sex and the City, there are cases where people are given antidepressants. Usually this is something like a tricyclic antidepressant, which is given in low doses, non-antidepressant doses, as a pain modifier. It's quite a common thing given for chronic pain conditions. But of course, also people with chronic pain conditions often suffer with depression and might also be given antidepressants for that as well. So these are 3 examples of how medical bias affects access to diagnosis or access to treatment for women or people with an anatomy that we associate with women. Here are some other statistics. Women are more likely than men to be given sedatives than pain relief for pain. They're half as likely to be given pain relief for a coronary bypass, and twice as likely for heart attack symptoms to be misattributed as mental health problems. Women are 7 times more likely to be misdiagnosed when having a heart attack. And 70% of people with chronic pain are women, but 80% of studies are in male mice or men. Men wait 49 minutes for acute abdominal pain relief in hospital. Women wait 65 minutes. And women are 13 to 25% less likely to be given opioids when in pain than men. And these biases are amplified even further in people who present as women and are marginalized in other ways. Now, these stats aren't perfect, partly because we don't prioritize the topic enough to do research on these figures. So every stat I've given comes with a pinch of salt. But I think one of the important points is to listen to women's experience, and they can tell us about it. But as far as I can see it, there are 3 issues when it comes to healthcare for women. The first is that their symptoms are dismissed. We feel unheard and disbelieved. Then we're denied access to a diagnosis, or we're misdiagnosed. And then we're given delays, and then we have delays or a refusal of access for the treatment to those conditions that we've been refused diagnosis or misdiagnosed with. It can be a completely never-ending cycle as we then go back to the doctors to talk about our symptoms, which get dismissed. We might get a misdiagnosis replaced with another misdiagnosis, or perhaps a correct diagnosis on the second try, but then further refusal or delays in access to treatment. So I want you to imagine a scenario. I want you to imagine you had a bug, probably a cold, maybe it was COVID, and you felt unwell like you usually do when you get sick, and then you started to feel better. The worst of it went away, your throat and chest cleared. And then, after you got better, you noticed you had these symptoms. You had fatigue. You're tired all the time, not just tired like you stayed up all night with the kids who were vomiting all night, but tired in your bones. You can't keep your eyes open at work. You have to hold on to a trolley in the supermarket because you don't feel confident that you can stay awake walking around the supermarket. Maybe because you're tired or because of some other reason, you have cognitive problems. Your brain just isn't working properly. It feels like you've been surrounded by a thick fog, and you can't pick out the details because the things are obscured by that fog. You can't concentrate, and even writing the report that you write every single week for work is more difficult now. You have muscle pain. Your whole body aches. When you stand up, it hurts. When you sit down, it hurts. When you lie down, it hurts. There is nothing that avoids the pain. When you turn your neck hurts. When you bend down to pick something up, your back screams. You're in constant pain. And now you get tummy ache. You never used to have tummy problems, but now when you eat certain things, you feel sick, or your tummy gurgles, or you have to run to the toilet for emergency visits that you never used to have. It's embarrassing, and you're ashamed that you have to dash to the toilet so often. And you're more sensitive to lights and sounds than you used to be. You have to dim the lights on your computer, you have to wear earplugs in meetings because everything is more alive than it used to be. Everything feels much more difficult to bear. Something's wrong. You know something's wrong. These things have changed. These aren't symptoms you used to have. You hope that it'll get better, but it's scary. You worry that this will never go away. You will always feel this way. And you struggle to keep on top of chores and work. So you go to the doctor and you say, I'm not well, there is something wrong here. And these are the sorts of responses you get. Could you be stressed? We've just had a pandemic, maybe you're stressed about the pandemic. How about work? Has anything changed at work? What about money issues? Is anything happening that's affecting your mental health? Everyone gets tired. It's just a normal part of aging. This is normal. How's your mental health? Do you have any mental health issues? And then, what would you like me to do? I don't think you need this test. Did you find that on Google? It can feel like it's a battle just to be heard, just to be believed. And as you get the tests that you have to fight to get, you end up in this cycle of being dismissed and misdiagnosed or refused access to treatment, battered away by, well, your test results were normal, there's nothing we can do for you. This becomes a cycle. So this drawing is from a report done by researchers at the University of Liverpool, Liverpool Hope University, a charity called Chronic Illness Inclusion and funded by the British Academy. It's called Disbelief and Disregard, Gendered Experiences of Healthcare for People with Energy-Limiting Conditions. And they came up with this idea of the pathway to inequality. So here they talk about people who experience disbelief and discrimination from medical professionals. They go on to be unable to get adjustments in their work or education. They're unable to access benefits. They're unable to access health and social care. They experience disbelief and isolation from their family and friends. And all of these things combined mean that they have a negative impact on their self-esteem and mental health. They have to fight for access to services, which gives them worsening symptoms. And they might then avoid medical care and then have to start again with less energy, fewer resources, and worse health, and it becomes this vicious cycle. Participants for this report told researchers things like this. One woman said, "A pain specialist told me that the reason I wasn't coping," this person said they were coping fine, "was because women are weaker and can't handle pain as well as men." Women, do you agree that we can't handle pain as well as men? Another participant said, "I've learned to spot when I'm not being believed, and now I ask my husband, who has a PhD, so can call himself doctor, to speak on my behalf. Things which I'm told are impossible are immediately fine when he asks for them." And this person said, "Disbelief makes you feel exhausted, but also guilty. You're made to feel like you're wasting someone's time or you're being uppity by challenging a doctor. I was told recently that you must get the idea that you have endometriosis out of your head by a gynecology consultant, contrary to the opinions of 3 GPs and 3 other gynecologists I had seen, and I had to make a formal complaint. The whole experience left me feeling angry, but also irrationally guilty. So what's the answer? If you're not being heard by your doctors, maybe you turn to your friends. But as that pathway to inequality suggests, you might get to this point where your friends start to lose patience. They stop believing you because the doctor would have found something by now. So maybe you turn to social media. You find a support group for people with a particular condition, or you end up on Facebook or Telegram just looking for people who have similar symptoms to you. Maybe you start to encounter the idea that the medical profession is actually looking for more money, and it's all a bit of a conspiracy theory to keep people ill. You ask questions online, you start looking for alternative answers and alternative treatments, and you end up somewhere like Goop, which tells you that bacterial dysbiosis could be the root of your gut problems, tells you about adrenal fatigue or eating to combat brain fog or taking supplements for energy problems. They have the answers. And if you just spend the money, you can feel better, you can be better, and you can be in control. Work hard, follow this routine, try this diet, and you will be well. You can be in control. It's up to you. Control is such a big part of the wellness industry. And remember I said that wellness isn't only about pseudoscience. So here's an example. Once you're distrustful of medicine, you might then start to worry that the hormones that you take, your hormonal contraceptive, is causing some of your symptoms. So maybe you turn to an option that doesn't include hormones, like this one, Natural Cycles. Natural Cycles is a hormone-free, prescription-free birth control. It has no side effects. It is FDA approved. The answer is on your phone. It's an app on your phone, and you have control. The app works by using an algorithm to assess the data that you feed it, and it's basically a combination between the basal temperature method and the rhythm method. You measure your temperature every morning at the same time as soon as you wake up, and you put it into the app. And it will assess the basal temperature changes and predict whether you are fertile. A red graphic will show, don't have sex, you are fertile, or not fertile. A green graphic like this will show. And you just have to make sure that you abstain from penetrative sex on your fertile days, or use another contraceptive. Scientifically, it's sound. The basal temperature method works pretty well. It's a reasonably good method for tracking your fertility, and we use it for people who are trying to conceive as well, to track their fertility. But you need to take your temperature at the same time each day, and you have to abstain or use alternative protection on the fertile days. Natural Cycles say that with typical use, their system is 93% effective, and it's about as effective as some other hormonal contraceptives, and much more effective than the male condom, which is only 87% effective with typical use. The issue is that while it works for a lot of people, it has risks. So one of the issues is that on the days where you're fertile, you're going to be using alternative contraception. Which alternative contraception are you going to use? You're not going to take the contraceptive pill, because that takes 7 days to kick in. You're not going to get a hormonal IUD fitted. Lots of people don't use vaginal rings, because they're not very popular. You're going to use the male condom. So on those fertile days, you're actually using a method that is less effective than what you would be using if you were taking something else. Unless you're abstaining on your fertile days, your risk of pregnancy on those specific days could be a little bit higher than when you're using the pill. Which is fine if you're aware of the risks, if you know that that's what's going to happen. But in 2018, Natural Cycles got into a spot of bother with the Advertising Standards Authority for not being crystal clear on this. And many gynecologists recommend that this is the sort of birth control that you should use if you're in a long-term committed relationship with somebody with whom it wouldn't be catastrophic if you got pregnant, that you're in a position where you might be trying to conceive in the near future, which is actually what the founder and one of the gynecologists who works for Natural Cycle said when they tried to describe what they think is a good customer for them. So this is from an article that said, the ideal app user, Berglund, the founder, says, is a woman in a stable relationship who is planning to have children at some point and who would like a break from hormonal contraception ahead of trying. The gynecologist points out that it's not a good option for women who absolutely want to avoid pregnancy, nor does she recommend it for anyone who has what she describes as an irregular lifestyle, irregular menstrual cycles, or lacks the motivation to stay on top of their cycles. Control and autonomy, big parts of the wellness industry, can only be useful for people if they have the information to make a well-informed decision. And if that information is easy to follow, easy to understand, and not too time-consuming to digest, because we're all really, really busy these days. So while many wellness-related companies are offering women empowerment and control, there are issues with this empowerment and control. Empowerment and autonomy is such an important part of well-being, health, and medical choices. It's vital, and it should be part of all of our healthcare decisions. But it's also a pretty convenient way to land all the responsibility for any failures in those treatments with your customers. The problem is, right now, we have a gap. Because of medical bias, women don't always get access to the care that they need. Particularly disabled women, particularly women of colour, fat women, LGBT plus women, any women who are marginalised in some other way in addition. And that gap is being filled by the wellness industry, selling quick fixes and answers where there is uncertainty and distress for those people. Until we fix the big picture, the wellness industry is only going to continue growing because it offers solutions to problems that we have. So what's the real answer? I'm going to leave the last word to those researchers that I told you about earlier, because they've got the pathway to equality. I don't think the answer necessarily lies in regulating the wellness industry, although it would be great if we regulated the wellness industry more. To some extent, I think that ship has sailed. We need tools that prevent people from spiraling into following wellness in the first place. So this is the pathway to equality from those researchers that I told you about earlier. They talk about how if patients are believed and supported by medical professionals, if they get timely referral to specialist multidisciplinary teams, that they get continuity of care to explore any new symptoms, that they get support in applying for adjustments in work or education, that there's advocacy and support available for applying for benefits, that there's access to health and social care, that they get understanding and support from family and friends, that there's peer support groups and mental health support, and accessible routes for patient involvement in research and policy making, then those patients can feel trust, agency, support, and feel like they have shared decision-making and make choices for their health that works. Until we have answers that really help us in our health and wellness outside of the wellness industry is just going to keep on growing.